We just reached 5,000 subscribers, so to celebrate, I am going to be showing you how I made this first-person shooter in less than 2 hours. Follow me for this speed tutorial. First, the not so glamorous part, shoot reference. I am going to be using this little purple body that proves that you can be creative with any prop. Then I'm gonna go to Turbo Squid. Download a general handgun. This one is free. I am going to link it in the description down below. I am gathering it as reference as well as my human rig, and I am going to hide a lot of the parts of my rig so they don't bother me in camera view. Then I take the curve, I shape it as my weapon, and I'm putting the geo inside the hierarchy for that curve. What I want to do next is create my camera. It has to be in the middle of the arms of my character. And one very important thing is that we have to think about gameplay. What is going to be comfortable for the user? They have to feel as if they were holding the weapon, but at the same time, it doesn't have to block a lot of the player's view. Please like this video if you're enjoying it so far. Let me know in the comments down below which is your favorite first-person shooter game. Now I'm heading over to perspective view, I'm scaling the weapon, and I'm making the fingers look nice, just like in my reference. In case you haven't, make sure you check out my hand animation video. You can find it in the top right corner. Here I am rotating my carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges. Out of all the fingers, the thumb is always the trickiest. The thumb actions are flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, and opposition. So there's always a lot going on with the movement of the thumb. I strongly recommend that you look at your hand or look at your reference, because even if you think you know how your thumb moves, maybe you don't, because thumbs are weird. Never animate only to camera, you also have to animate everything in perspective. It is not convenient to just animate using your main camera, because when you do this, other departments that go after you, for example if they are gonna do the lighting, the rendering, and all of that after you've animated, they can run into big trouble if you didn't animate things properly in perspective. Things can look off, elements can be on top of each other, there can even be a mirror in the shot that you weren't even planning. Now I'm adding my first key poses. While animating a weapon, it's very common to make different mistakes regarding the model of the weapon you're working with. In this case, we're using a normal handgun, and we have to take into account the recoil. The recoil, the charging, the shooting, the speed, all those elements are going to be different depending on the kind of weapon you're animating. You gotta be careful with that and look at real reference for them. When we're animating for gameplay, it's very important to create animations that loop, which means that the first frame and the last frame need to be exactly the same. That way you export your animation in chunks to later import it into Unreal Engine, for example, and assign different buttons for different actions. But as long as everything goes back to that same frame, it doesn't really matter which button the user presses, since visually it's always going back to that same first pose. To the player, the animation is seamless. In this case, the shooting action is going to take 15 frames. The first frame, the last frame need to be the same, and then what I'm going to do is just take those 15 frames and repeat them again and again. So just copy paste, just because I am rendering it all together and you can see what the action looks like. Now the second action, which is the loading. Here I am placing the fingers, making sure that it sort of follows my reference. I am making it a little bit heavier because my object in my reference obviously was very light. Remember that when things are heavy and we are animating those heavy objects or heavy characters like Godzilla, for example, it's gonna take a long time for them to gain speed. Once they gain speed, they can be very fast, but to gain that speed, they're gonna take longer. So in this case, what I'm doing is that I'm making my weapon stay kind of in the same position. I am aiming for the tip of the gun to stay kind of in the same place, so you can really feel that the hand is moving, but it's taking a little bit of effort to move that hand. Now comes the time to engage the left hand as well. The left hand is going to be catching the magazine outside of frame, and then it's going to be loading it and putting it back. So we're actually just going to see the left hand when it's putting the magazine back. This is a clever little trick that I'm implementing because we don't have a magazine geo and I don't plan on modeling one just now, so we're not going to see it. One little secret that now you know is that in game animation sometimes you don't see the magazine, the little chamber, because putting in the bullets and everything would take time, would make everything a little bit more complicated. If you had a different gun, the animation would change a lot. So in game animation, we usually want to animate things very fast, and we want to submit the shot with the highest quality possible as soon as we can. Also, the player is excited and they want to charge the gun fast, so the gameplay would be very slow and feel dull if these actions took too much time. Now the character is pulling back the slide. In my reference, I noticed that my hand was looking too feminine, something that I didn't love once I was seeing it here. So I am aiming here for a less delicate hand shape, something where the fingers are a little bit more engaged as he's grabbing the slide. I am working here with every single finger. I just uploaded 3 videos to our Patreon account explaining how to animate hands. It's a step-by-step guide in Maya so you can follow along. I strongly recommend that you go watch those little tutorials about how to make hands instantly more appealing, relaxing the fingers, and how to create overlap and that like natural organic feeling in seconds. Little tips and tricks of how you can learn to use your graph editor. Remember that my Patreon subscription is actually very affordable. I made it so that it's accessible and affordable to anybody. And that little subscription really helps me pay for my editor, as well as me expanding this channel and this community, so I really appreciate the ones who help me. As of today that I'm recording this video, I have 7 amazing Patreons. Sonny, Andres, Kian, Leclerc, Michael Philippe, Ender, and Mauricio. Thank you guys so much for being the official sponsors of my channel. Now what I'm doing here is that I am not constraining the left hand to the weapon at all. I'm actually leaving it free. Why? Because it's only gonna be in contact with the weapon for a few frames. So if I really eyeball it and make it match, I will have a lot more freedom to animate. If you're using this technique, you just gotta be very careful, because it's very easy for things to look slidey. So the best way to do this would be to look at something in the weapon that has texture, see a part of a hand that's touching that area, and go frame by frame, making that match. So it doesn't look like the hand is moving and the weapon is not moving, or the hand is moving more than the actual slide. Now, as soon as the left hand comes on top of the weapon, we want to feel that little weight down. The key to a realistic performance when you're animating in 3D is to really be careful about all those little elements, like physics. This is a tricky part because the weapon is constrained to the right hand, but the left hand, as I was telling you, is free. So now we're actually countering the animation. We want the right hand to be reacting, but we want the left hand to follow, and this is a little bit complicated, a little bit tricky, but fun. The camera animation can really vary from game to game. Some games have a really intense camera motion, and some others are more subtle. One thing that we take into account is that animation for game works by layering animation. So whatever I am animating right now needs to be a little bit subtle, because there will also be a motion of the camera if my character is moving in space, if the character is walking forward, backward, sideways, looking up or down. That is part of the gameplay. So if in my loading I have a very intense camera animation, and then we add on top that the character is walking or moving around, it will be too much for the player, so I'm keeping it safe, making it slight, but I really like it. I feel it gives it a lot of realism. To animate the camera, I just threw in a polyplane just to not have a monochromatic background. Have a fast line of horizon to see what my camera is doing. And I always say cameras are like handguns. If you don't know how to use them, stay away from moving them. A bad camera can really harm your animation. But you can see what I'm doing here. It's very slight. I am adding a little bit of back and forth, translating, rotating in X and rotating in Z, but always trying to keep the weight of the camera consistent. Then I created a dome light. I downloaded an HDRI from the website HDRI Heaven. I placed it as a texture, making sure the color space is raw. This will give me a quick fake environment. Then I am making a little constraint system so that by moving one locator, I control the camera, the character, obviously the weapon as well because it's being held by the character, and the bullet caskets that are gonna be ejected out of the ejection port. And in this case, I am modeling a little bullet, very quick and simple, and I am relying a lot on the Catmull-Clark subdivision right here, which is the one that when you select geometry in Maya and press 3, makes the geometry smooth. Our handgun doesn't really have an ejection port, which is that little hole on top where the cartridge case is supposed to be coming out from. But we are hoping nobody realizes, because the movement is too fast. To finish this, I am just animating the cartridge cases coming out of the ejection port. That is supposed to happen really fast. Then I added some little smoke puffs and all the layered elements in Premiere Pro. To texture and to render, I was using the standard version of Arnold, and this is our final result. Let me know in the comments down below which is your favorite first-person shooter game. Please like, comment, and subscribe to see more of this content. Oh, and don't forget, Trikingo is a site where you can download many different tools and tutorials. If you are an animator, if you want to learn scripting, if you want to even learn how to make your own video game, it doesn't matter if you're highly experienced or you're new to the industry. There is content for all kinds of CG artists. You can see these tools being used over and over again in the pipelines of the most important studios around the world. My subscribers and I get a 20% discount in any purchase. There's even free stuff to play around with. I will leave you guys a link in the description down below. Make sure to check it out.
Thank you so much for watching and keep making art, you beautiful artist. Ciao.
Thank you so much for the 5K subscribers, guys. You are amazing.